hey, listen, this year it hasn't happened often, but I walked away from a Bills game feeling kind of decent about it. I understand it was a 1-score victory for Buffalo. Buffalo defeats the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Buffalo at home, victorious 24-18 in a game that I think a lot of us felt should have been over by the end of the first quarter. Ryan, you were in attendance. How loud was that stadium? Because there were some offside penalties early in that game. It just felt like that place was loud.
Yeah, I mean, it was loud early. It was loud before Buffalo started to get points on the board. I think there was just like a feeling of desperation in the stadium. It was like, come on, let's turn the corner here. Let's do the old Buffalo stuff.
Yeah.
And then they did the old Buffalo stuff, right? And I think the crowd was kind of feeding on it. And then I know we talked just before we went live. I feel like some coaching decisions kind of took the crowd out of it a little bit. They, felt some momentum. They wanted to go for it on fourth down. They didn't go for it on fourth down. They wanted to go for it at the end of the half, take a shot down the field and try to get points. They didn't. They'll let kind of Tampa kind of stick around a little bit longer than they should have. But I mean, ultimately it was back to offensively. It was back to kind of what a lot of folks thought this team was going to be. And the stadium was feeding off of that throughout the game.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, again, we talked about it last week, right? When you talk about an identity crisis, in playing complementary football, beating a team that I'll be honest with you, right? Tampa Bay is holding on to a dream because that team is not great. They've got a lot of aging players. They've been just trying to keep the band together. But Evans looks cooked to me. Looks slow, right? Godwin doesn't look fast out of breaks anymore, but these guys are older receivers. And, this was a team you probably should have beat by 2 scores, right? And the score ends up being 24-18. Going to the last drive, Buffalo really just sat on the football, which was really frustrating to me, right? Because you've only got a 6-point lead. Your defense is beat. Now, don't get me wrong, right? I thought the defense played great tonight. I don't really feel Tampa was ever really in the game regardless of score. And I think, again, to your point earlier, that's probably like a product of the fact that like you walked away with a field goal on your first drive when you were in complete control that whole drive and you walk away with a field goal. It's that aggravating stuff that you look in the rear view and it's the fourth quarter. Like, man, I really would have preferred to have a touchdown there because then we're looking at a 2-score lead. But McDermott bet on his defense like he does all the time. And I think that's just going to be the way that this is, right? A victory is a victory. So I don't want to complain too much. The offense was promising. The defense did well. But McDermott leaning on the defense is at least a red flag to me to say, I don't think we're speaking the same language as the coaching staff, right? As fans, I don't think we're in the same ballpark as each other with what we're comfortable with right now.
Yeah. And I mean, that's McDermott, right? I mean, this is who he's been throughout his entire time as a head coach. He leans on the defense. Yeah. He doesn't use his timeouts right. He doesn't really know how to manage the clock too well. He kind of got out coached a little bit, I thought, at the end of the half, the first half, where, Tampa was perfectly content taking a 58-yard field goal with the running clock. So McDermott calls a timeout to try to salvage some time. And Tampa winds up taking the penalty and punting and making it a longer field. I thought that I think it was the Godwin catch in the drive that Tampa winds up going down and scoring. I think there was a Godwin catch that was really tight on the sidelines. I thought that would have been a good opportunity to challenge. One that was like the 7th play of the drive, give your defense a chance to take a blow. No harm, no foul if you don't win that challenge. But I thought it was close enough. And instead he lets Tampa run up and, run a quick play and go for it, which should tell you all you need to know about whether that was a complete pass or not. I just felt like the offense, this is what the offense should have been doing since Milano went down. I think the offense kind of bailed the defense and the coaching staff out a little bit on this because they were effective enough to go down and get a 2-score lead despite some of the coaching mishaps. So, the offense did exactly what they should be doing when it's the best side of the football.
Yeah, and I think that's the change here, right? Is McDermott has oftentimes bet on the defense, right? You always see that, right? He always errs on the side of the defense. And this was, again, another example of that. Drunken Gamer says, not sure I would call that dominate. Yeah, and the fact is, and it was brought up, Naveed said this, we almost lost that game in the closing seconds. Like, that was bad. the ball fell between Godwin and Evans in the end zone. Not a Bills player was interested in putting a hand on it. Not a one, right? Again, like it's hard for me when you have the 25th rated special teams unit in the NFL and you're comfortable punting with a 6-point lead.
Yeah.
I'm not great there, right? I wouldn't be great there even if Buffalo had their healthy defense. I wouldn't be great there in any instance because Buffalo left a ton of points on the board here. I think there's a lot of pluses to take away, so I definitely don't want to harp on that too much, right? But one thing that we saw last week that we saw less of this week, running backs, 2 targets combined between Latavius Murray and James Cook. The running backs were sort of a larger part of the passing game last week. And listen, just wasn't there for them today. Is that something that is a product of them just understanding Tampa and knowing what Tampa was going to run and being comfortable there? Or is this just something we're going to see where sometimes Josh just forgets that the running backs are on the field? And not that he needed them today.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it was when there were passing situations because they didn't have Dawson Knox, they couldn't run that 12 personnel. You saw more Latavius Murray, and we talked about this early in the year that was going to be his role, was kind of that pass blocking role, that extra lineman that is, you have to respect him a little bit, right? So, I mean, I think part of it was Cook wasn't really out there too much. I mean, especially that first drive, they went fast. It was Murray to start the drive, and it kept being Murray because they didn't have any time to run any subs out there.
Yep.
You know, and
well,
Cook
because in the rule,
well.
and let's just talk about that real quick. So you saw that up-tempo offense, and you just said something I want to make sure everybody understands. If Buffalo makes a substitution, they have to give applicable or reasonable time for the defense to make a substitution. That's why when you run an up-tempo offense and you don't make a substitution, the defense can't make a substitution either, right? So that's just how that goes. So when you get a good matchup, you should be exploiting that. Buffalo was talking about running more up-tempo coming into this week. It was the buzz all around Buffalo. Buffalo starts with that and runs it a couple times during the game. The downside to running an up-tempo offense is when you don't get a first down, you burn no time off the clock. And if you've got a fledgling defense that's just kind of holding on for dear life, you're just throwing them back out into the wolves, right? Some games, it's a great asset. Other games, it is counterproductive to the type of offense you should be running within the game, given the tempo and given how that game is going. But yeah, I just want to point that out.
Yeah, and that's important for people to understand about kind of like what happened at the end of the game, right? Especially when people are saying like, well, I wouldn't call what happened domination. Okay, when you go through the stats, right? Like Tampa had 302 yards of total offense, 62 total plays. 21 of those plays came on the last 2 drives of the game, and 117 of those yards came on the last 2 drives of the game, right? So, and they were up tempo the entire way on that 17 yard or that 17 play drive for the most part. So that defense was gassed, which is all the more reason I felt like they should have gone for that 4th down on their last drive.
Buffalo, instead of letting it go, because they took the delay of game to punt.
Right. Yeah. Instead of just, it was 4th and half a yard. You know, I just keep going back. You know, I go back to, you've got Josh Allen. He's 6'5", 240. Like Jalen Hurts does it with a much smaller frame. He can get 2 yards at the snap of a finger. And I can't fathom how McDermott doesn't trust Josh Allen to get half a yard. Right. And it's just part of that, some of that maddening piece of it. But I mean, ultimately, when you talk about domination, I mean, Buffalo, the defense held Tampa to, it was 180 yards of total offense until that second to last drive where they went down and made it a ball game. And by and large, this was just complete demolition by Buffalo. Just they can't close. And that's the McDermott special since he's been a head coach. They struggle to close football games because he doesn't have that killer instinct to go for it. He'd rather punt and trust his defense to make the final play of the game.
Yeah, and I think, once you start again peeling back the pieces of the game that could have gone better, I just personally want to take the goal line shotgun draw and shoot it straight into the sun.
Terrible.
I'm so tired of that play because listen, I understand plays sometimes fail and they fail forward. And what I mean by that is You fail a play forward when it's there to set something up. A goal line draw out of shotgun is not setting anything up because there was no motion with it. If you're running a jet sweep motion with it, if you're given some sort of look, there's some sort of deception there where you might do something other than a shotgun snap goal line draw play, right?
Yeah.
Especially when the numbers tell you that will never work, right?
Right.
It'll never work. So, and we've seen it in multiple weeks. So it's a thing Buffalo's trying to run. But the problem there is that it doesn't set anything up. The only thing that it sets up is Josh keeping it to go around the end, which is what everybody thinks they're going to do anyway. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and part of the problem is, too, I think that Dorsey has justified that play in the past by saying it's worked in the past. So we've gone back to it. And, I think if you're going to run inside, I like James Cook. I think he's a good weapon. If you're going to run the football inside the 5-yard line, I don't know why you're handing it to James Cook. It needs to be Latavius Murray, 6'2", 220,
or even Ty Johnson, like insert disposable running back here, right? Like it's I right. Yeah, I mean, totally.
If you're going to show, I mean, if you're going to run that draw, like you said, maybe it's a jet motion, maybe it's go back to that play that they scored in the Giants game, right? Where you kind of motion Hardy into the backfield and then split him back out. Like it's going to be like that little misdirection, swing pass,
right?
Something to get the defense off base. But, I thought by and large, Josh felt like old Josh today. He kind of played fearless. He, took what was there. He ran, which, again, a designed run in the first drive of the game. I was like, a designed quarterback run in this economy. Like, what are we doing here? But it was effective. Right. And I think, we've tongue in cheek, Mario and I have been joking throughout the week about, this chaos theory, right? Where like Josh running puts so much pressure on the defense. Like they have to respect his legs, and that quarterback draw early in the game just set that up. They're like, we have to respect the fact that he can run. Right. And every time he broke the pocket from there on out, it was a different look than what we've seen in the last few games when he breaks the pocket, because in the past, nobody's been afraid he was going to run the ball, because he just hasn't. And today he finally did. And you saw what that did. The Dalton Kincaid touchdown was a direct correlation of Josh breaking the pocket and running.
Yeah, because it pulled Vontae Davis.
Absolutely.
Right.
It sets it up because you have to respect, you have to respect what's in front of you. You can't worry about what's behind you. And that's where Josh kills you.
Right. Well, and raise your hand in the chat if you're happy to see 11 personnel. Right. Raise your hand.
Finally. Oh,
I
God,
know.
Finally.
I know. It took Dawson Knox going on the IR, but this is, I think, a sign of the fact that you have a coach that is really, really tied to, again, some older tendencies on the offense. Right. And when you have a player like Dawson Knox, who can put together some nice plays for you, and then you have a weapon like Dalton Kincaid, it's so flashy. You're like, we should get both these guys on the field at the same time. Yeah. Teams would never, they'll be so pulled over by Kincaid. Knox will be there for, those easy zone reads. And the truth of the matter is it just hasn't, it doesn't fit Buffalo's strength. They look a lot better in 11 personnel, a lot better. And
Josh just seems more comfortable in it.
I agree. I agree. Well, the reads are faster. The reads are faster.
The reads are faster, and I think that it's easier to spread out, right? Because as much as you like Kincaid and as much as you like Knox, they're not field stretchers. You're not worried about them getting behind the defense. So when you switch out Knox and all of a sudden on comes Khalil Shakir for more snaps, now that's a guy that can kill you deep, right? Yep. And we saw him today kill them deep a couple times. And that's the difference between, what a 12 personnel brings you, where it's like, well, yeah, we can be multifaceted and we can run the ball more frequently and we can run some more misdirection stuff. But it's like, but when it's a pass play, there's like two guys you have to worry about deep, right? Versus 11 personnel, where now I've got three guys, and now I add James Cook running a wheel route, and it's like, holy shit, what do I do defensively?
Well, and I'd argue that James Cook was less effective out of 11 personnel. I think that's something to be concerned with. Cook isn't the biggest guy, so I think running 12 personnel is one of those situations. And again, just to clarify, 11 personnel, 12 personnel. Sorry, we normally cover this. Mario is the one that covers this. 11 personnel is one running back, one tight end. 12 personnel is one running back, two tight ends. And the Bills have been running a ton of 12 personnel with Dawson Knox out and Quentin Morris out. Buffalo just ran an absolute ton of 11 personnel. But James Cook, 14 carries, 67 yards. It's 4.8 yards carry. And a long of only 18. And only a long of 18, right? So it was an effective game running the ball at 11 personnel.
I mean, he ran the ball really well. I thought there were more holes for him today. I thought there were more opportunities for him. I thought there were a couple of chances for him to where I'd like to see him a little stronger in the lower body, break a couple of those shoestring tackles. But, by and large, I think you can argue that this was probably his second best game of the season in terms of rushing the football. And a lot of that had to do with spread it out. There's a risk of Josh pulling it and running because, again, he did it on the second play of the game, and all of a sudden everything else opens up. And that's that what Mario and I have been talking about. That's that chaos Josh is just it's just when you have to plan for the unexpected with Josh Allen, it makes it so much easier for everybody else to get open.
Right. Well, and I think that brings us to the next point here, Ryan, is spreading the ball around is something you're going to hear a lot of. And even the post-game analysis was like, oh, Buffalo spread the ball around. And you just saw Josh Allen kind of smirk like, okay, sure we did.
Yeah.
Like the Buffalo they were more efficient at receiving the ball today.
Yeah.
I would not say that they were
targets.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And only 4 of them had more than one, so it's 6 guys had targets. Murray and Cook only had one aside. Everything else went to an even split in targets between Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. A couple of those Gabe Davis targets were tossaways, right? So they weren't real targets. But 12 targets for Gabe Davis, 12 targets for Stephon Diggs. And then after that, Shakir brought in a bunch of targets in that first drive, which I thought was really smart because it forced the defense to not just commit everything to Diggs, right? Like I really think Tampa thought that they were just going to be able to bracket Diggs and the offense would just sputter. But by driving, I think Shakir had 4 targets or 4 receptions in the first 2 drives.
First drive, yeah.
He had 6 targets on the day. He was 6 for 6 for 92 yards. Career day for Shakir, right?
And it's interesting
and
the way
impact
that they did
was huge.
Yeah, interesting the way they did it because the question coming in was what was going to happen to Dawson Knox's targets, right? And the answer is they're just going to go to Khalil Shakir, right? They're just going to go to Shakir because Dalton Kincaid didn't see an increase in targets where he's been over the last few games. He's been right at that 7 target range. That's where he was today. You saw Gabe Davis get some extra targets. I don't think that those were Knox targets though. I think those were more so the running back targets that we talked about. It's just they went to Gabe in different areas of the field. He's been used on that outside the hash type of stuff. And this time they ran quick screens to him. They ran him across the middle. They lined him up in the slot, which a novel idea, right? Like he's more efficient in the slot throughout his career than he is outside the numbers. So why not? Let's try putting him there with Knox out. So, it was just like, what happens to the Knox targets? Well, they're just Shakir targets now. And the difference is that when Shakir catches it, he can turn up the field and go. Versus what Knox catches it, where he kind of plods along and then finally just runs into a guy.
Well, and that's something this team has really lacked, right? Is that yards after catch. But I think a lot of that is scheme because Josh makes reads so late. He forces the ball a lot of times into tight coverage, and the guys just, they catch it and they get caught. That's what happens.
Well, we saw that with the Shakir target. I think it was maybe the second or third drive of the game where Shakir was kind of like the clear route that went from left to right. Josh was reading the left side of the field, and Shakir was wide open. I mean, there wasn't a defender within 7 yards of him. Right. And Josh just kind of fixated on the left side of the field and then finally came back to the right side and threw it to Shakir. But by that point,
he'd been covered up.
Recovered. Yeah. And it would have been a touchdown if you threw it to him early. But I think it was like a half field read. Shakir was the clear route. So Josh was keying in on the routes to the left side that was supposed to clear. And then it was kind of like almost like the light bulb went on where he's like, well, hey, the safety didn't go with Shakir. Maybe I should look over in his direction. Right. And he looked over in his direction and threw him the ball. So, it's just like you said, it's just, I think scheme gets guys open. And Dorsey did a much better job, I thought, of that today than he's done all season.
Yeah, Red Sand, great comment here. It was a miracle we saw non-congested routes that were open within the pressure time frame. And that's something that we've been pretty critical about over the past few weeks. Thanks so much for the comment. It's when Josh would miss a guy, there'd be 3 Bills in the area and they're all 25 yards downfield. You're like, what the fuck is happening here? Like, why are there so many of you over here? And today it didn't feel like they ran anything that would force the receivers to get congested, right? Because everything was pretty quick. Josh was getting the ball in and out of his hands in under 3 seconds for a vast majority of the day. And again, Tampa didn't have an answer for that, right? Now they don't have the
Mhm.
secondary to keep up. Like, I think that's the primary driving problem with their defense is they don't have the secondary to keep up with three legitimate targets. And I think
Right.
Shakir stepped into the legitimate target category today. And then I saw Trent Sherfield out on the field for the entire first half of the game, and all that I saw was a little laundry on the field when he got called for holding.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was his impact in the game, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
And
that's what it
interesting
was.
you said in and out of the hands of Josh Allen. The stat came, Elena Getzenberg from ESPN actually tweeted it out that Josh Allen today averaged 2.2 seconds on
Yeah.
his passes.
Yeah,
And
I
it was
believe
the
that.
fastest of his career.
Yep.
So
I believe that.
it was very, it's good to hear because it's good to see that that's what it was because it looked that way. And
Mhm.
Josh talked about that, right? Like
Right.
earlier in the week, he said, I just need to stop thinking and just go out and play football. And that's what he did today.
Mhm.
And Dorsey did a good job of just calling routes that were like, just throw them right now. Don't think about it. Just,
Mhm.
it's okay if you stare down a guy if it's not a
Right.
long developing route, right? If
Right.
you're throwing it as soon as he gets out of his break, you can stare at him all you want.
Mhm.
And they just went back to, it just felt like they went back to last season's Bills, where it was just like,
Mhm.
this is what works. Go fast. Don't make Josh think. Let him run if he feels like he needs to run, and just get guys into open space. And
Right.
Allen's going to figure it out.
Right. Well, and we're leaving and talking about this like it was a solid game, but the fact of the matter is, of the Bills' 5 final possessions, 1 touchdown, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 consecutive punts. Now, mind you, those were punts. I think it's fair to say those were punts with purpose because all of those drives took almost 3 minutes off the clock if they didn't exceed 3 minutes. So,
And they're really good punts too.
Yeah.
They're really good punts.
Yeah.
I mean, Sam Martin was that dude today.
Yeah.
In the special teams.
Right. But again, not something that you really want to depend on when you've got one of the worst special teams units in the NFL. And that's statistical. That isn't Paul, dumping on the special teams unit. That's just a fact. They have one of the worst rated special teams units in the NFL.
They'll come up after today. I thought they had a much better game today. I mean, they were covering so well on kickoffs that the Bucs actually used that new fair catch rule in the second half to like, because they weren't finding any success returning the football. And hey, kudos to Josh Norman, right? 35-year-old Josh Norman. He was making big time plays on that kick.
That was a big hit.
Coverage. Yeah.
That was a big
he
hit.
Had the first 2 tackles on kickoffs were both Josh Norman. The second one was a massive hit. And, okay, I guess, like, cool. If we need to bring a 35-year-old Josh Norman in to shore up the special teams unit, then that's cool, I guess.
And an inactive Khalil Elam for a 35-year-old Josh Norman.
It feels like such like a doghouse situation for Elam. It just doesn't feel like, I don't know. It's difficult to convince me that Khalil Elam isn't a better option than a 35-year-old Josh Norman, but maybe, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty tough one. Sonny Lamont comes in. Thank you so much for the super chat. All super chats go to the hashtag charity for 2023. Hello from Alaska. Glad to hear from you, Sonny. Glad we won. I'm loving my guy, Kincaid. He had another one. I like that one. I like that. Yeah. Kincaid had another one coming out party. Kudos to Shakir as well. I thought Kincaid on that shovel pass was in.
Yeah. Another one where I think it would have been worth a challenge. If you're, and don't forget, they didn't score on that drive either. They kicked a field goal on that drive.
They sure did.
Or no, that was the one that we went 4 and out, right? They didn't kick the field goal on that drive. I think they went 4 and out. That was the one where they went for it on 4th down.
Oh, yeah. I think you're right. Yeah,
so
they put him down because that was the almost safety on Baker. For the record, Baker got out of some bad situations with
all
late
the more
throws.
Reason I thought. I mean, if you're, I guess if it's in the back of your head, McDermott, that like this is go for it on 4th territory, like all the more reason to challenge it, right? Because why not? Why not?
At that point, why not?
Timeout early in the game, at least burn it trying to get points.
Can we talk about some of the timeout usage today?
I love talking about McDermott's timeout usage.
Yeah, it's you're
lucky Mario's not here. This would turn into a half-hour conversation.
Again, a game that Buffalo was in control of the whole time, right? There really wasn't ever a point where I felt like the Bucs were in control of this game. I thought Buffalo was in control the whole way. I really that's it. I know what the score says, but we have yet again another odd situation where like you let the Bucs burn seconds off a clock on a field goal that you know they didn't want to kick.
Right.
What are you doing?
Right.
What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you've made the decision, like if we have the time, we're going to go get points at the end of the half. You've made that decision, right? You make it before there's 19 seconds left on the clock and you call that timeout. You've got to be on top of the refs calling timeouts early in that drive, especially when you stop them on third down and you know it's going to be a 50. What was it? It would have been like a 58-yard field goal or something like that.
Well, and they had already had a kick blocked once already.
And he barely snuck in the 56-yarder that he had kicked earlier. So it's like you questioned the leg, right? Can he go 2 more yards with as close as he was the last time around? Worst case scenario, he makes it and we get, 23 seconds or whatever to 2 timeouts after the kickoff. Best case scenario, you block it or he misses it. You get the ball at the 48-yard line and you've got to get 10 yards before you're in field goal range. It's just, it just felt like it's indecisiveness combined with like panicky timeout calls. And they did another one on the last drive of the game. The last drive of the game, the defense is calling a timeout. And it's like, Sean, like, what are we doing? Right? Like, why are you giving the offense who needs to go down and score a touchdown more time to consider options to go down the field and score a touchdown? Right. And he almost, it's like defensive timeout drink with Sean McDermott. It's just maddening to watch week in and week out. And it's not going to get better. He's been doing it for 4 seasons, so it's not going to get better. So this is just the world we live in now.
Yeah, and the defensive timeout, I didn't understand at the end of the game, right?
I didn't know. Yeah.
I didn't get that. Was it a personnel issue? Like, did they not know they were going to throw the ball with 16 seconds left? Like, what are you doing calling a timeout there? You have the advantage there. They have to come to you. So what are you doing calling a timeout there?
Yeah. Especially because that's a situation where if you're going to use a timeout in that situation, you call it before the Hail Mary, like before the last play of the game. That's where you're kind of like, all right, like we know what's coming here. Let's call a timeout. Let's huddle. Let's talk about what this looks like. Remind everybody to knock it down kind of stuff. And instead he burned it early and it didn't make sense.
Right. And instead they responded with no Bills player paying any attention to where the ball was. And then
luckily
it just
no Bucs players were paying attention.
I know, no kidding. There were a lot of penalties on that last play. I think
the Bucs were surprised that Baker got it to the end zone. I think they were just like, he doesn't have this kind of arm. And
there were some crimes committed near the end zone. I think Vita Vega had a funny comment. I just had it up on screen. He said the kicker for the Bucs swung his helmet at the Bills. They were not kicking it there.
I know he was swinging that helmet around like he was in Ndamukong Suh or something, or Aaron Donald. Like, what are we doing? Or
Terrell Bernard, kudos to Terrell Bernard for lighting the fire under the kicker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but I guess this is where the game kind of turns for me, though. Ryan is, first off, the defense. Poyer probably his strongest game of the season, right? Saw a lot of Taylor Rapp today.
They played him a lot more, but they played or they played Poyer a lot more in the box, right?
Yeah, like he was and they had Rapp on the backside
in that dime situation, and then played Rapp in the back, which I like that lineup better because before they were switching it and they were trying to drop Rapp into the box, and he's just not a strong enough tackler. So you bring Poyer down into the box,
right?
His angles don't have to be great because he hasn't had great angles all season. So what do? You just cut down the angles that he has to take, right? And just put him in the box. And we saw a much more effective defense. So you're going to see that a lot going forward, I think.
Right. Well, first off, I wasn't mad at the Rapp pass interference. Like, it was close, right? Like,
I felt like it could have gone either way. It was close enough to where I was okay with it.
Right. Yeah. He got up.
Yeah.
He had.
That was.
He had bunnies on that. Yeah, I was impressed.
Because Cade Otton's big, and he's a big boy. Him.
Yeah, he's a big boy. I was real impressed with how he got up on that one.
Yeah,
right.
Agreed.
So again, the penalty is the penalty. What about on 4th down twice? You had drive extending penalties. for or against Buffalo. Again, any one of those plays, plus that one time Buffalo called the timeout when they absolutely had Baker dead to rights in the pocket. That happened twice, I think, actually.
Yeah.
There was offsides that blew a play dead that Buffalo had it was down by the goal line. I forget when exactly it was, but there were 4 times that I could think of where Buffalo was out of a situation and either a timeout or a penalty put the Bucs right back in it again.
Yeah.
And are we
And there was
thinking of this game differently?
I think didn't Miller have Baker in the grasp and one too?
Yeah.
It seemed like on that last drive where I thought they could have blown the whistle
Yep.
there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's where, maybe the game wasn't as close as it felt. I will say Buffalo covered the under. Was not expecting that. Right.
Yeah, under was 42.5, right?
It was 43.5 when I saw it. Yeah, it was 43.5 when I saw it. And when the score's 24-10 coming out of halftime, you're like, yeah, we'll cover. You'll cover the under.
Under, no worries. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll get to the over, no problem. But then Buffalo didn't score again in the second half. So we went from this whole, oh God, Buffalo's been, they only had 10 first downs in the first half of games, the last 3 games coming into this one, and they scored 24 points. And you're like, I'm feeling good about this situation, right? And then you don't score a single point outside of the first drive in the second half, right? You put up a touchdown, end of list.
Right.
I get their purposeful drives, but that's coaching, right? And that is coaching.
And not a single one of those drives, and not a single one of those drives takes more than 3 minutes and what was the longest one? 3 minutes and 30 seconds off the clock. Like if you're not going to score, you have to at least be efficient with your time,
right?
And you have to run clock if you've got that kind of a lead. Yeah, right. I mean, I thought the refs bailed Tampa out on the illegal contact. I mean, I thought that was just a bad call. I felt like Tampa was initiating as much contact as Teron Johnson was. But for whatever reason, Teron Johnson just doesn't seem to get those calls. Like he's physical enough. I feel like maybe there's some complaining to the refs that goes on throughout the game because he tends to pick one of those up every game. The Jordan Phillips face mask, you just can't have it. I mean, that's Jordan Phillips,
and that is an undisciplined player,
aggressive Jordan Phillips, and that's who he is. It's who he's always been. I feel like he was rubbing off on Ed Oliver early in Oliver's career, and that's one of the reasons you saw Oliver picking up dumb penalties like that too. I feel like he's been kind of stabilized a little bit. But yeah, that was just a bad. You can't have it. You just can't have that type of penalty. And then even at the end of the game, right before the Hail Mary, like the Von Miller offsides, you can't have it. You can't have that. Right? Like Baker's got to throw it 65 yards to get it into the end zone, and you pick up a stupid offsides penalty. Like
to rush 4. What are we doing rushing 4?
1, why are you rushing 4? And 2, why are you trying to get a jump on the snap? Like, are you actually trying to get to the quarterback? Because that's not what you do in those situations. And it really could have been bad if it hadn't have been direct line, because it maybe gives Baker an opportunity to draw a flag down the field, and that's something you just can't have that situation.
Yep. Donnybrook, Evans scored because of that Phillips penalty. Yeah. True story. People are still saying to fire Dorsey. Again, they made things for Josh easy. And we talked about that last week, right? We talked about what to expect going into the next game. You're on a short turnaround time. So what's achievable? And what's achievable is you just simplify, right? You run routes everybody runs in college. You just simplify, take the offensive line out of it, and you get things out quick. If it's not there, Josh, you got to go. But I guess this is where I think some of my concern comes, because now Buffalo's got a little bit of a longer time before their next game. Josh in the medical tent with his shoulder saw Kyle Allen warming up on the sideline. By the way, Bills have are 3-0 when Kyle Allen appears in games, and that's a good stat. But Josh's shoulder is not great, right?
Yeah.
And I think, you can look at it and say, well, he's still throwing the ball 87 miles an hour, into traffic. But he's a gutsy son of a gun, right?
Yeah,
he's like Favre in that respect, where just as long as his shoulder's still attached, he's going to go out and try and play, right?
Yeah, I mean, he threw the ball 40 times today.
Yeah.
And he threw it 41 times last week. So, I mean, it's really, and from everything that I've read about what it looks like his injury is, and if you guys aren't following, I definitely recommend you follow Banged Up Bills on Twitter. He's a great follow, Dr. Kyle Trimble. He just kind of seems to allude to the fact he thinks it's really just pain management at this point with Josh.
Do you think it does? Was it an AC joint sprain? Is that what he's thinking it is?
He thinks it's just an age. Yeah, the way he's kind of holding it close to his body, kind of shaking it out, trying to get it out, and that's kind of why, he thinks it's really just pain management. So it's probably a shot before the game. It's a shot at halftime, and it's just kind of like go out there and just do what you can. But the problem is that tends to lead to poor mechanics. I know Mario's talked about this on the show before. Poor mechanics. You drop your elbow. You overcompensate because you can't really feel a lot. So you kind of like tend to put a little more on the ball than you want to. And you don't see those looping passes too much. And we haven't really seen that from Josh all season. Those kind of like those floater passes. They've all
saw one early.
We
saw one to Gabe. We
That's
saw one to Gabe. That was the only one. That was it, though.
And then I thought that was a nice touch pass. The one that Kincaid went up and got along the sideline. That was a good touch. It was more of a rope, but there was some touch there. It wasn't just, he wasn't like firing it out. There was definitely some loft to it.
There are quarterbacks in the NFL who would need a running start to throw the ball that hard. Okay. So you can't call that a touch pass. Jesus, right.
Yeah. The good thing is for Buffalo is that they've got 10 days now. They got the mini bye before they have to face Cleveland or Cincinnati. Yeah. And then they've got the bye week coming up in a few weeks. So by all means, I think, it's just like last season, right? Like Josh is going to play through it, and you just hope that whatever he does, it's not going to impact his ability to throw the ball downfield. So
but it dispels the narrative of Josh needing to run more, because you saw Josh slide today.
Yeah,
twice, a couple times, a couple times, and not a Kyle Orton slide where you slide short of the first down accidentally, right? He saw the space, he went down. Had plenty of space at the time. And I think he, was able to pick and choose what he did today, but you could also see he was limited, right? And I think that's yet another reason why you didn't see Josh under center is because, again, they're trying to make things easy for him. You saw them run some bunch formation sets today, which, again, knowing that Knox was going to be injured and easy to install stuff, because we had heard that Knox was pretty banged up in post game last week after the McDermott interview. And he's like, Knox got a wrist. We don't know. It's not looking great. So you knew you're going to be running more 11 personnel. You bunch some receivers up, you make life a little easier to read. But Josh isn't an under center kind of quarterback, right? Could he be?
You could definitely be. Right. Yeah, he could be. You definitely could predict a lot of 11 personnel tonight when the lineups came out and there was only one tight end on the roster. Right.
Yeah. Right. And, because Reggie Gilliam doesn't count. David Edwards should not count either. No. That is unfair to make tackle eligible. Right. Is Edwards is a guard. He's not even a tackle.
No, well, he lines up as a tackle. So
that's why I'm waiting for a big man touchdown. It's been 3 seasons. We have not seen a big man touchdown. I do remember Ryan Bates running a drag route last year, and I am looking forward to that yet again. I miss the days where you could sub in any player you wanted in Madden at any position. I wish they would bring that option back, because it was so much fun to make Joey Galloway your quarterback. So much fun, because he was so fast. Him and Dante Hall. You just
so Bills fan 21. I think that's a good point in the chat. Is that Josh is making a conscious effort to not take hits, and if you can combine his dynamic play ability to adding to that the ability to avoid big hits, it's kind of like the perfect scenario for Bills fans, right? Because that's been the concern, is that he takes those big hits, he takes those big risks, he hurdles, yada yada. He's going to get himself hurt. He's going to turn into Cam Newton. But if he can be a more dynamic Patrick Mahomes, which is what he is when he takes off out of the pocket. He's far more dynamic than Patrick Mahomes is out of the pocket.
Right.
Take that and just turn that into Mahomes' ability to just take care of himself once he gets the yardage he's going to get. He scampers out of bounds, he slides. Right. That's only going to help, because it's going to lead to flags he's going to start drawing some flags on those types of plays, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when he runs the ball and he takes those big shots, like sometimes they want a flag and they're not going to get that because he's a running back.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's still a quarterback running, like you're going to start getting those calls and it's just going to lead to longevity. But keeping that chaos mentality of just making it difficult for defenses to plan on what you're going to do.
Speaking of chaos, who would have seen Shakir stand a guy up on the sideline? Good for you, 185-pound Shakir.
That too. I mean, that might be angry run. It's an early submission by Khalil Shakir. Yeah,
so,
I mean, you love to see it, and it was firing the defense up along the sidelines when that happened.
So funny story about the angry run, because this actually plays into something I don't know you know about. So Kyle Brandt retweeted a picture of a guy wearing an angry run 26 shirts in front of his house, which has the Zuba light on it, right? So Kyle Brandt retweets it and says, "Look at this house." That's the bass player from my band.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it was from our band's handle on Twitter. So yeah, it's fun, just funny, very right? Cool. That you bring up the Kyle Brandt angry run thing. But yeah, so that was my bass player. Cool moment, right? Cool moment to see that.
Sure.
All right. So Brandon, thank you so much again. All super chats go, they're a donation to the hashtag charity for 2023. Thank you so much. Brandon says, was tonight the end of 12 personnel? Did we showcase Gabe? Elam definitely gone. Knox gone too in the offseason. DK is the real deal, and Knox had contract. So let's break down some of that, right? First off, Gabe Davis walking into a contract year. So, you know, anything you do for Gabe is just making him more expensive for you next year, right? So you're not really gaining anything by making Gabe a more integral part of the offense. You're costing yourself a little bit more money, to be honest with you.
I think, Paul, this is more my tongue-in-cheek joke that I made in the chat earlier. Like showcasing him to package him as part of a deal. I think maybe that's more what Brandon is alluding to in this question.
The truth is, was this the end of 12 personnel? I think there's a legitimate argument for something like that, right? Because to be fair, the offense spread the defense out in a way that they struggled to earlier in the season. And it was sustainable. It wasn't just this was the script, and once they were off script, they were back to what they were doing before. They were able to run similar concepts the entire night. And it was good to see consistency. It was the first time I've really seen consistency across play calling across all quarters.
If this offense continues this way, and they just convert some of these missed opportunities into additional points, right? Like this really could have been a 40-point game from the offense. They left some opportunities on the field. When Knox comes back, I think there's going to be a very significant discussion within one Bills drive of what do we do with Knox, right? Because Kincaid is clearly a focal point of this offense, even before Knox went out in 12 personnel.
Yeah. Right.
And you now have refound your dynamic offense.
Right.
And when Knox comes back, the question is how do we work him in?
Yeah.
Do we work him in?
Right. You cut Reggie Gilliam is what you do. You cut Reggie Gilliam at that point.
Ideally, yeah. I mean, ideally, you cut Reggie Gilliam. I mean, and you kind of go with what you've been working with, and he just kind of fills that role. But I think that again, if this offense continues this way over the next few games, when Knox comes back, there's going to be very long discussions in house about what is his role on this team going forward.
Well, and Buffalo just paid him too. So again, there's some contract things at play. He will return this season, but I think when you run 12 personnel, it muddies up Kincaid's routes a little bit, right? So it muddies up the routes. And I think that was pretty obvious tonight. Right.
Yeah. I think it does restrict the offense because let's be honest, Knox is not a strong route runner. Right. And I think that limits what you can do offensively because he's got to run a seam route or he's got to go find an open spot in the zone. He's not great at finding open spots in the zone. He's good at running seam routes. He's very limited in his route tree. And I think that makes it very difficult to open up the offense when you've got a guy out there who's so limited running routes. Right.
Yeah. And, you know, on top of all of it, when you take a look at the other side of the football and you have an inactive Khalil Elam, I think this is just one of those situations where Buffalo's just going to sit on him and he likely won't be in Buffalo next year. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hope that you can include him as part of a package if you are looking to make a move at the deadline.
Right.
You hope that someone is looking at him and going, hey, he was a first-round pick. We had a first-round grade on him, reclamation project,
Right.
defensive-minded head coach or defensive guy going, I can turn something, because all these guys are alpha males, right? Like I can fix him. They all think they can fix all these players, right?
Oh, sure.
So you're hoping that you can package him as part of a deal. If not, he more than likely gets moved either on draft day or shortly after the draft next year. But I don't see Kaiir Elam suiting up for the Buffalo Bills in 2024.
So I'm going to throw this out there, and not that this would happen. However, when the Bills did restructure Deion Dawkins' contract to free up $3.9 million or somewhere around there, I want to point out that Levi Wallace only has $2 million remaining on his contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just want to point that out. If there's a Bean and McDermott move, it would be to send Kaiir Elam to Pittsburgh for Levi Wallace.
And Mike Tomlin may take him. I mean, there's that reclamation project.
That's
concept,
what I mean, right?
That's
what I mean.
And I definitely I've seen the Levi Wallace. I've seen a couple folks mention that.
Affordable, right? It's a budget conscious move.
And he's a familiar
he walks
name,
right in. Yeah, he walks right in.
Bills fans right? He walks in. He knows the defense. He's already played here under McDermott. Again, I'll just be interested to see if they make a move, right? Tuesday's the deadline. We're going to get through these Sunday games, and I think things are going to start getting fast and furious, but we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I think I talked about this. I was on Rock Power Report this week with Drew, and it was kind of like my comment was like, if you're going to do it, like at some point you have to go all in. And I think if you're going to do it, this is the season to do it. You got 10 draft picks next year. You've got guys that you could potentially move if you're looking to upgrade your wide receiver too. You've got a Gabe Davis that you could add in as a sweetener as part of the deal to maybe limit the loss of draft picks. And again, you've 10 draft picks next year. That's a lot of ammunition to go out and get an impact player now versus using them to trade up in the draft next year.
Well, especially since this is a very running back and quarterback rich draft upcoming. And I think a lot of teams want a seat at the table there, right? So any ammunition that you can get in any capacity for a player that you're likely going to lose anyway, I think the separation's there right now in the season. There's a lot of really bad teams in the NFL this year. A lot of times you have teams that just kind of hang out in the middle ground, but there's a lot of really bad teams who are in certain need of help on the offensive side of the football, and they've got guys that they need to part with.
Yeah.
So this year is different than a lot of other years as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, agreed.
So going into next week, looks like let's see here. Buffalo's playing the Bengals. That's an 8:20 game on NBC there in Cincinnati. Right now, the matchup predictor on ESPN says Buffalo 72% likely to win this game. That's a big number. Right. I know since he's had some problems, right?
It's hashtag metrics, man. But I don't know how you can watch this football team over the last few weeks and go, yeah, they're definitely better than the Bengals, like 3-1. I struggle with it. It was the same thing. It was
away.
Yeah. I mean, it was the same thing we talked about before with them being 8.5-point favorites heading into this football game. I almost feel like the way I spun it was, if this was the old Buffalo Bills against this Tampa team, this should be a double-digit spread.
Right.
Like it's almost underselling Buffalo. I thought, that the Vegas is kind of cooling a little on Buffalo. They were only 8.5-point favorites against Tampa, and obviously they didn't cover the spread. So,
right.
I mean, we'll see what Cincy looks like this weekend.
I think the difference is that Buffalo, if you look at Cincy, they are averaging less than 70 yards a game on the ground, right? So that's a team that literally can only move the ball through the air, and Buffalo has more passing yards per game than they do. So again, on paper, offensively, I don't think this matchup doesn't look good for Cincy. Now, they had a couple dud games early because they were trying to roll out a very, very injured Joe Burrow and a still very injured Joe Burrow. So one of the reasons that
Buffalo is they do have the mini bye.
Right.
And Cincinnati's not going to be able to get into a rhythm heading into this game because they got San Francisco this weekend.
Yeah.
And that's a pissed off San Francisco team too.
Yeah.
They're
Oh, yeah, because they just lost. Yeah.
it's a 2-game skid. So
And if you're Buffalo, great spot to be sitting behind San Francisco here, because from a preparation standpoint, you can't cherry pick anything from what Buffalo does to San Francisco. The two polar opposite teams as
well, and
far as how they generate moves.
it sounds like it's going to be a Sam Darnold led San Francisco 49ers
Yeah.
as well, which
Yeah.
means it is going to be a hyper physical football game.
Mm-hmm.
That San Francisco, that Kyle Shanahan, he is going to try to just bludgeon Cincinnati to death offensively and defensively.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that mini bye, it just bodes nothing but positive for Buffalo heading into this matchup because it's going to be a beat up Cincinnati team, I think.
Right. Yeah. And, Joe Burrow, half the touchdown passes and half the interceptions, but Josh Allen. But again, I just I'm not a believer that since he's dead in the water, they've still managed to pull off. They've only lost one game at home. They're 3-3. I get where they are, but they punted the first 3 weeks of the season. With playing Burrow, that was clearly banged up. They punted the first 3 games of the season. So I think Cincinnati's in better shape than I think a lot of the pundits will give them credit. Is this a get even game for Buffalo? Right? Like, I don't know. It's a lot of the same players for Buffalo that were there last year. So I think the emotions tell you. Yeah.
Micah Hyde didn't get to play last year.
No.
Von Miller didn't get to play last year.
No, missed
I
that
think
game.
there's guys out there. This is as much as Tampa Bay was kind of billed as like a get right game for Buffalo, the Cincinnati game is a statement game. Like, this is their opportunity to come out and say, yeah, we've struggled the last few weeks. We're still the team that boat raced Miami. We're still a team that can come out and boat race any team in the NFL and go toe to toe with, for whatever reason, people think Joe Burrow is a more talented quarterback than Josh Allen. This is an opportunity for Buffalo to come out and say, our number one is better than your number one, and we're going to prove it here. Gain momentum going into the playoffs. If you see this team in the playoffs, just have that in the back of their heads, because I think it's in the back of Kansas City's head. And I think, we've seen Buffalo get the better of Kansas City over the last couple of seasons in the regular season. And I think that's led to some success, would potentially lead to some success in the playoffs. They obviously got them to 13 seconds 2 seasons ago, should have won that football game last season. I think that Buffalo was really the only team that scared Kansas City.
Yeah. Casey got a pass. Yeah, they got a pass on that one. I will say, when it comes to this upcoming matchup, right? It is, what's the best way for me to phrase this? Buffalo is a real hard team to prepare for with this game on film when you look at the 2 games that came before it, right? Because most NFL teams scout the last 3 games, right? So that's how they build their preparation. They look at, what did you do to prepare for your opponent, and what can we do to game plan against what you did against that opponent? And then they figure out where their scheme fits in the middle, right? So they try and figure out how you plan to attack them, and they figure out how they want to attack you. The last 3 games for Buffalo, all very, very, very different approaches to what we saw tonight, right? On the defensive side of the football, again, a very different look than what Buffalo has done the previous weeks. Buffalo did a lot of work on a short week, and it was really, really impressive, to be honest with you, because I was concerned that Buffalo would walk into this game flat again. But defensively, I felt far more confident in Buffalo's defense tonight. They're flying all over the place. You didn't see Dorian Williams. Looks like Dodson's got that other linebacker spot when it's not Poyer, right? So a lot of changes tonight that are film changes. Buffalo's a real hard team to scout right now for Cincinnati, and I think that does play to their advantage. Although, again, it's something that you might not really hear. It's true. Buffalo's going to be a hard team to prepare for Cincinnati specifically, and honestly, post Cincinnati for the game following as well, right? Because again, 3 games of film is what they scout, and Buffalo's going to be a hard team to prep for.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think you talked about it to open the show, like no running backs in the mix in the passing game. I think that's a deviation from where they've been. I think, take out Knox, insert Shakir, like no Deontay Hardy. on offense. Like,
No,
is
zero.
that the offense going forward, or do we start to see some Deontay Hardy mixed in next week as Cincinnati to be like, hey, there's no way you prepared for this because we haven't shown him over the last couple of games.
Right.
But again, the 11 personnel opens up the opportunity for Hardy because with 12 personnel, if Hardy steps onto the field, he's taking a spot away from Gabe Davis or Stephon Diggs. If it's 11 personnel, then Deontay Hardy comes on.
It's a legitimate
fear. A little bit much of a drop down,
right? And it's a little bit more of a legitimate threat. I think the Bills had this problem with Isaiah McKenzie, where when McKenzie was on the field, he was going to be running a jet motion, right? Like It was obvious. Everybody knew what he was on the field for. So I think with Hardy right now, out of 12 personnel, you run in the same situation, right? If you're running 12 personnel, you put Deontay Hardy out there. The team knows, okay, they're going to try and there's going to be some mirage with Hardy, but he's got 8 targets on the year.
But when he's on the field, again, you put on tape in that Giants game, the misdirection that led to the touchdown. They threw the touchdown pass to him in that really fun kind of play that they ran to him.
Yeah.
He's again a field stretcher. You have to respect his speed. I think they're going to find ways on. This is a short week. They lost Dawson Knox. They had to kind of go back to what's the personnel that we've had over the last couple of seasons. Let's just go back to what we're comfortable with. You got 10 days now to prepare. I wouldn't be surprised to see some Deontay Hardy worked in to the offense against Cincinnati. They're paying him a lot of money to be a punt returner right now. He's a dynamic punt returner, but they brought him in to be a more talented version of Isaiah McKenzie, and they haven't really showcased that yet from him. So
well, and we've seen Hardy down the field in targets, and throwing to a 5'6" receiver down the field is just
you've got to get him behind. That was Josh's first interception against the Jets, was a deep ball to Hardy. And he's not going to win a jump ball. So they have to find better ways to get him in space. And this week, they did a much better job of getting receivers in space. So take the space that the receivers had to work with today, insert Deontay Hardy catching the football, and you can kind of imagine what that yards after the catch looks like with him.
Right. Oh, you'll love this. Garn coming in with a Ryan Lasel 101 comment.
Shout out to Shaq.
Shout out to Shaq Lawson's hand for that block field goal. Shaq on special teams where he belongs. Just want to point that out.
Hey, where he made the roster and he's making an impact. That's all that matters.
He's not a good defensive end. I mean, I cannot believe I'm going to say this. AJ Epinesa looks so much better than Shaq Lawson.
AJ Epinesa right now looks like the second best defensive lineman on this roster.
Rousseau looks rough. His angles are bad. You can tell
looks like a guy who's not used to getting this type of volume snaps. He just looks, that sack that he missed in the third quarter, that was a fatigue sack. I've been on the field a lot tonight, and I just can't bring him down. Vaughn, I thought, looked better today than he did last week, but he's not back to 100%. But I think when it comes down to defensive linemen, it's Ed Oliver, it's AJ Epinesa, and it's a lot of guys who are really going to benefit from this additional 10 days off.
Yeah, and I think Vaughn is. You can see that Vaughn doesn't have the speed right now, right? Yeah. There's just no jump there. So he's trying to power through guys, which I understand, right? That would be what you would do, right? And Vaughn's a big guy, so he could power through a left tackle. But the fact of the matter is, you could just tell Vaughn just doesn't have that sprint yet. I'm thinking after the bye, we'll start seeing that a little bit more. Yeah. And you're right. I think Floyd looks great in the first half of games. But he looks tired right now.
But he's also a guy who's been under 40% of snaps for the last 4 years of his career, and he's asked to do more this year, and I think that's starting to show a little bit. So it'll be good to get Rousseau back healthy. It'll be good to get Von Miller back healthy, because that just increases that rotation and lets Floyd be more impactful in his fewer snaps that he's going to get.
Yeah. And shout out to Ed Oliver, man. Like a healthy Ed Oliver.
Big difference maker, man.
Big difference, man. I know it got to make Joe's skin crawl. Joe calls the game for us every week. It's got to make Joe's skin crawl, but Ed was a difference maker today, right? Like if Ed's got to be the double team eater, that's not what you want him to do. That doesn't utilize his skill set the way that you want. But if that's what you got to do, then that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
Because
and he's willing to do it too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He does a great job getting dirty. So I can't complain about that. And again, from the linebacker group, Buffalo did a good job against two very experienced receivers, and kind of benefited from the fact that they bargain basement hunt for slot receivers and running backs. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's what Tampa's been doing. They put all their eggs in the defensive basket.
But I think what they finally did that I've been wanting them to do is McDermott finally like put on his defensive coordinator hat, and he's finally like scheming patches in that defense. He's finally scheming up ways like Poyer playing the dime, right? And wrap over top, Poyer dropping into the box. Now it doesn't matter that I only have Bernard out there on defense because I've got Poyer, I've got Teron Johnson, who basically both play like a slot corner linebacker situations. That's what I've been wanting from McDermott. It's like, hey, Sean, like you're a defensive coordinator by trade. Like you're supposed to scheme this out of your defense, like make up for these injuries, fill these holes with your scheme, with your creativity, with the other talent you've got on your roster.
Right.
And he hasn't done it. And tonight, I think, was the first time we've seen it. And it just, again, it adds the versatility. If he can start to find a rhythm with these guys, with this type of defense that they're running, they're going to be a team that can hang on and get to the playoffs. And some of these guys might be back, right? Like there's an outside shot that Milano's back. There's an outside shot that Daquan Jones is back. And that you getting two guys back like that come playoff time, that can change absolutely change the complexion of what the playoffs looks like.
Oh, absolutely.
For a team like Buffalo, because they're going to be well rested and hopefully they're going to be healthy. And again, it's telling that neither guy has gone on any type of a long-term IR. They're both on just on that short-term IR situation where they can come back after 4 weeks.
And I'm a member of the Wrap Christian Benford and Bubble Wrap team because when he's healthy, he's a fun play, man. Like he kept up all game. And again, to me, when you have a really veteran wide receiver group that you go against, that's a test of those players who don't have the pedigree, right? So like you'd expect a player like with the pedigree of Elam to keep up with a veteran receiver quicker than a player like Benford who doesn't have that pedigree. Benford was all over the field, came in only 3 tackles today, but 2 passes defended. Like a great job that Benford does, and
yeah, I mean, anytime you can hold Mike Evans to 3 catches for 39 yards, that's a good showing by your secondary for sure. Cause he's a guy that can get hot real quick. And even the touchdown, like that doesn't bother me.
It went off his helmet.
It was pretty
went
good
off his helmet.
It was just a great catch.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was another one where Dane was in coverage and there was just a phenomenal catch. And I don't even remember who it was, but again, I am fine with Benford and Dane Jackson. Like I'm fine there. I'm good there. But Benford, it just, the defense doesn't look the same when Benford's not on the field. In that secondary.
No.
Great find, man.
And actually, if you close your eyes and you figure, if you pretend that Benford was the 1st round pick and Elam was the 6th round pick, it kind of
you don't feel so bad, right? Yeah, it's easier to swallow.
Absolutely.
All right, Ryan. So looking forward to the next game. Anything? So you talked about the Bills having a long week. Injury reports. Buffalo. So the interesting thing about Thursday night games is the injury reports don't come out at the same time as the rest of the NFL. So it's going to be a little bit before you hear official injury news because Buffalo doesn't have to disclose any of the injuries till Tuesday. So it's going to be quiet. Mini bye for Buffalo. They've earned it. And then don't forget, Buffalo goes and they play Cincinnati at the 8:20 game on NBC
Sunday
on the 5th.
Football.
Yep. And then they go against the Broncos on the 13th.
Monday night football followed up with Sunday night, then Monday night, because remember they're in this stretch where they've got 4 night games and 5 contests. So definitely an opportunity. This is a good time to catch Cincy. I think they're still trying to find their way. And
every week's a good week to catch Denver.
Every week's a good week to catch Denver, and that's for sure, because then you get into, you're starting to get into kind of the meat of your schedule at that point. Because after Denver, you got the Jets, Eagles, Chiefs, Cowboys, Chargers. It's a murderer's row with a bye sprinkled in. So Now's
well,
the
and
time
you get
to win these football games.
And you get the Jets back on Sunday night. So you go Monday night, Sunday night. So you get the Jets on short again.
The Jets
right?
are a 4:30 start.
Right. But you're playing the Monday night game the week before.
Right.
Yeah. So, you get Jets on 6 days, not a full week. Hey, it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah, I mean it's Zach Wilson led Jets. I mean you should go out and beat that football team.
Hey, watch out for Luke Musgrave. Full mustache ride. That guy's on the full mustache ride.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but yeah, I mean this is the time. This is an opportunity, especially conference schedule. Like you're 1-3 in your conference, so these next 3 games become extremely important to get above. Start getting some of those tiebreaker points back.
Can you believe we got to talk about Buffalo having to get back to 500 inside the conference? Good God.
Yeah.
Good God. What world are we living in right now?
Yeah, and I would encourage everyone who's listening, root for the Jets this weekend because they got the Dolphins. So
yeah, that's right.
If the Jets win this weekend, Buffalo's back in first place in the AFC East, and that's going to be important going down the stretch because I think Miami is a team that's going to struggle against some good teams. They got the number 1 toughest schedule the rest of the way, and hopefully it starts this week. But Bills have to be big. Oh, Pats have the Dolphins. That's right, Spin. They have the Patriots. So we can root for the Patriots. That's okay. That's not going to hurt you to root for them.
They're just not a good football team. I know they won last week, but they're not good.
No,
they're not good. But hey, Bill Belichick had figured it out. Just win your games inside the division, and you only need 4 more wins to be in the playoff hunt. You just got 4 out of the next 7. That's all right.
Belichick finds a way. Finds a way. It's
amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. It's if you win every one of your division games, you're 6-0, right? You need 10 wins to kind of be in the playoff hunt. 11 wins usually get you into the playoffs. 10 wins can if you're in the NFC, the NFC East, you can get in with 6 wins. But if you win your division, that's 6-0. Right? If you beat everybody inside your division, then you just need to sneak 5 wins in 11 games somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Take care of your division. That's simple math. Belichick doing good inside the division this year. So we'll see what happens. All right, Ryan, excellent work as always. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks,
everybody. #Nation. Have a good night. Buffalo wins 24-18 in a heart-pounding game. Hey, Baker Mayfield, no matter what, right? Am I right? All right, guys. Have a good night. Thanks. Thanks, #Nation. See you next week.
Hello, fellow Bills fans. Sean Rogers, realtor and lead of the Mr. Rogers Homes team. Did you know that real estate is one of the best ways to build wealth, and right now is one of the best times to own an investment property in Arizona? Please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions so we can take the next step to your financial freedom here in the Valley of the Sun, utilizing real estate. As always, God bless America and go Buffalo!